Welcome to R&R Livin' Life. We pick up this episode as we arrive in Khancoban and begin exploring the town and its surrounds. From there, we will follow the Great River Road as it winds its way along the natural curves of the River Murray along the Victorian-New South Wales border as far as Grania, before making our way back along the Grania Road through some spectacular mountain country to Boulia and on to Gidget at Tallangatha. In 1824, Hume and Hovell were the first Europeans to pass through the district, and graziers soon followed, impressed by the abundance of fodder and water. The district was first settled by Europeans in the 1830s and known as Swampy Plains. Khancoban is situated 13 kilometres from the Victorian-New South Wales border in the eastern foothills of the Snowy Mountains, with the area more dairy country than high country. However, with the awesome backdrop of Australia's highest mountains, the scenery is stunningly beautiful. The town was built in the early to mid-1960s to accommodate the thousands of families involved in the Snowy Mountains hydroelectric scheme, constructed between 1949 and 1974. The town is still mainly populated by workers employed by Snowy Hydro Limited, working in such places as Murray 1 and Murray 2 power stations. On our way into Khancoban, we stopped to check out Khancoban Dam, an earth-filled embankment structure with a controlled spillway across Swampy Plain River, creating the Khancoban Pondage, a 3 kilometre long lake, one of 16 major dams in the Snowy Mountain scheme, completed in 1966. The dam diverts water from the Snowy Mountains into the inland rivers of New South Wales and Victoria, and is one of the longest but lowest dams in the Snowy scheme at only 298 metres altitude. The river rises at the southern slopes of Mount Kosciuszko at an elevation of 2,120 metres and is believed to be the highest river in Australia. From its headwaters, the Swampy Plains River is joined by 9 tributaries before reaching its confluence with the Murray, upstream from the Bringenbrong Bridge that we had stopped at on our way to Khancoban. The Snowy scheme has been described as one of civil engineering's wonders of the modern world and the largest engineering project in Australia. The scheme consists of 8 power stations, including 2 that are underground, 16 major dams, 80 kilometres of aqueducts and 145 kilometres of interconnected tunnels and pipelines. By using a combination of weirs, tunnels and dams, the scheme directs water into storages and diverts east-flowing water from the headwaters of the Snowy River and some of its tributaries, much of which formerly flowed eastward onto the river flats of East Gippsland, to be captured at high elevations and diverted inland through 2 major tunnel systems constructed through the continental divide of the Great Dividing Range. It is then released into the west-flowing Murray and Murrumbidgee rivers for hydroelectricity generation and irrigation supply to support agriculture in New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia. Electricity generation is a core byproduct of this transfer of water with the Snowy Hydro, not owning the water itself, but simply having the right to collect, divert, store and release the water. About 2.5 kilometres from Khancoban, we passed the Murray No. 2 hydroelectric power station, one of the original 7 power stations located immediately upstream of the Khancoban Reservoir. The station is not located on the Murray River, but its name is derived from the fact that its tailwaters ultimately drain into the Murray via the Swampy Plain River. We wanted to see the pipelines as they came out of the Great Dividing Range up close and were not disappointed. They were massive. To think that much of the volume of water we saw in the Khancoban Pondage had been gained from the Snowy River, including waters from the Gehi River, was mind-boggling. To have such a sheer volume of water carried through the Great Dividing Range and then released into the Swampy Plains River was staggering. It was truly amazing to see it up close. The Alpine Way through Kosciuszko National Park in New South Wales was constructed in 1956 to give access to the Snowy Mountain Authority and the scheme's engineering features, and was not completely sealed until the 1990s, which immediately gave Khancoban quicker access to Thredbo, Jindabyne, Cooma and Canberra. Prior to that, there had been a track which had been built in the early 1930s, supposedly following the route the Aboriginals took when making their annual pilgrimage to the Bogong Moth Country. Unfortunately, the track was so steep, rising to 1,800 metres every 10 kilometres, that even cattle had difficulty using it. Some days I have trouble keeping up with all the different names used for the roads we were travelling. In Victoria, they are usually a B followed by a number, and then some are part of a section of a highway with a different name to the rest of the highway. Like in most areas we were travelling, there are the tourist drives and then the regular names, but I find that some overlap and are often confusing. From Khancoban we made our way back along the Great River Road that took us alongside the River Murray in eastern Victoria from the Snowy Mountains to Lake Hume. We crossed back over Briggenbrong Bridge and on over to Wong Gap. As I have often said, the country is forever changing, and along this section of our travels it was no different. From bright green irrigated crops to very dry, almost barren hills and paddocks, often with livestock showing signs of the dry conditions. There is always something of interest to see. The township of Toowong in rural northeast Victoria is situated on the Murray River, named after the Toowong pastoral run of 1837, which was taken up by a New South Wales pastoralist. Grazing was the main farm activity, with dairying increasing after 1890 as dairy factories were opened in the area. Toowong is home to the historic Toowong Turf Club, hosting thoroughbred horse racing since 1871. The area has been noted for cattle grazing and horse breaking, with properties kept large beyond the era of farm selections, although a soldier settlement scheme had been established at Toowong Upper in the early 1920s. Today, the region is known primarily for production of agriculture and forestry. Rick and I were enjoying this section of the Great River Road, taking us through some stunning iconic landscapes from the Snowy Mountains early on in this episode to the Upper Murray with its broad open river flats and rolling hills. Such a diverse environment, from alpine highlands and wetlands to lower valleys with rolling hills, forests and productive farmlands. There was also high-quality remittent vegetation in national parks and state parks, lakes and river reserves and wilderness areas, alongside beef and dairying farms. It was turning out to be a wonderful scenic drive, tracing the early course of the mighty Murray, around corners, winding bends, tight curves and smooth flat straights, and best of all, very little traffic. After leaving Toowong, we stopped at Ferran's Lookout, a stunning vantage point with sweeping views of the Snowy Mountain ranges, the surrounding farmlands and the Murray River flats. In winter, I am sure it would have picturesque winter views of snow-capped mountains. After spending time admiring the views, we continued along the Great River Road to Tintaldra on the upper reaches of the Murray River. The 1830s saw occupation of the lush river flats around Tintaldra, with the arrival of squatters looking for fresh grass and water for their cattle, and by the 1840s saw the beginnings of a village on the Murray, as unlucky prospectors began to look for farms. In 1864 saw the construction of the store from roughly cut Red River gum beams and rafters, and walls made from vertical slats of stringy bark timber. A hotel followed 6 years later, as well as a hand-hauled punt that facilitated traffic across the river. The river crossing, a post office, police station and custom house ensured Tiltandra became a main route for travellers heading north and south between the colonies of Victoria and New South Wales, with postal delivery from Melbourne taking 2 weeks on horseback, the longest turnaround in Victoria. Federation and the development of other river crossings into New South Wales led to a slow decline. Soldier settlers moved to the area after World War One. Much of Tiltandra was burnt to the ground in the Black Friday bushfires of January 1939, except the store. We again had to cross the border, just to say that we had been on both sides of the Murray at Tiltandra. An interesting stone cane mounted with an anvil and plaque recognises the first Vogel settlers, Christian and Elizabeth Vogel, and their 11 children who worked tirelessly in the area. A huge sculpture of a Murray cod was mounted on the remnant pylons of the original bridge in the middle of the river. From Tiltandra we crossed the Cudgewa Creek that flows through a wide valley. The fertile land in the area is an ideal place for dairying and beef farming. It was in 1866 that the first farmers took up land in the area. We passed what looked like abandoned dairies and old sheds, though I am not sure if they are still in use, though did appear to have hay stored in some. It is disheartening to see what remains of some of those early pioneering structures, just left to become ruins, as they are no longer required today, as farms have had to amalgamate to be profitable. It was then on to Jim Newman's Lookout, overlooking the Murray River Valley, with its wide river flat surrounded by mountains. Not only was the scenery stunning, but the huge metal bogan moth sculpture was impressive. As we stood under the bogan moth's wings, the natural sunlight through the moth cutouts on its wings made for some interesting scenes. Our next point of interest was Pine Mountain, a gigantic monolith said to be 1.5 times bigger than Uluru, situated in the Barroa Pine Mountain National Park. The gigantic red granite monolith was uplifted to its present height of 1,062 metres more than 2 million years ago. Since then, erosion has highlighted the steep eastern side, established several creeks, and in the upper area created small rock pools and offers a diverse range of vegetation types. We did not stop in Walwa, surrounded by lush pastures and big hills, but were still interested to find out that the settlement had begun in the area by 1837, with the town surveyed in 1870. Tin brought miners to the area in the 1880s. Dairying and grazing became the backbone of the local economy, with a butter factory built in the 1920s by locals, producing cheese and powdered milk, until it closed in 1963. Like other towns in the area, much of the town was destroyed in the devastating 1939 bushfires and then rebuilt in style. Today, many locals in the area are involved with cattle and sheep farms which surround the township. It was then on through Mount Alfred Gap to the lookout, featuring a large wedge-tailed eagle overlooking the stunning river and valley views of picturesque farming land. We passed through the northern section of Mount Lawson State Park, a 13,150 hectare area known for its steep slopes, cliffs and prominent rocky bluffs, with occasional views of the surrounding mountains and valleys as we continued along the Great River Road, having passed through Kotong on the southern side of the park earlier in our travels. Our next point of interest was the Murray Grey Monument close to the property Thologalong. At Thologalong in the 1930s, Helen Sutherland developed the Murray Grey breed of cattle from mulberry-coloured animals which had appeared in Peter Sutherland's Aberdeen Angus herd. Self-taught in genetics, she bred a strain of cattle which is now internationally recognised for its hardiness, temperament and high beef yield, such that Murray Greys are known as the gentle builders of beef. Similar in appearance to the Aberdeen Angus, but in grey, silver or dune colours. Local cattlemen soon became interested in the greys and began breeding them, with the first large-scale commercial herds established in the 1940s. The stone monument was erected in 1991 to honour the work done by Helen Sutherland in founding the breed. Just 2 kilometres from Grania, we left the Great River Road and made our way through Grania to the Grania Lookout, perched high above the Upper Murray Valley, with sweeping panoramic views of the surrounding hills, valleys and the mighty Murray River. It really is an enormous river. Grania was established in 1860 during the gold rush days, with the Upper Murray filled with excitement as tin, copper, silver, gold and other precious minerals were discovered in payable loads along its waterways. From Grania we continued along the edge of the Murray River, named after St George Murray, the British Secretary of State for the Colonies in 1830. The border between Victoria and New South Wales lies along the top of the southern or left bank of the Murray River, though this boundary definition can be ambiguous, since the river changes its course over time and some of the riverbanks have been modified. The Murray carries only a small fraction of the water of comparable sized rivers in other parts of the world, and with great annual variability of its flow. It has dried up completely during extreme droughts on 3 occasions since official record keeping began. More often, a sandbar formed at the mouth and stopped the flow. We left the Murray at Grania and made our way back to Gidget through Mount Grania State Park, named after the 870-metre peak Mount Grania, but first to Bullho on the Murray Valley Highway. On the higher sections of Mount Grania were open forests of eucalypts such as red stringy bark, long-leafed box and various species of narrow-leaf and broad-leaf peppermints, while on the north-facing warmer and drier slopes we saw some black cypress pine woodlands. As we returned along the Grania Road we could look down into steep valleys and across onto rocky plateaus. Cleared farmlands in some of the valleys created a spectacular and contrasting landscape to the forest country higher up. In isolated sections we could see where grazing and small-scale logging for posts, firewood and saw logs were happening. What a way to end our days exploring through some amazing high country, so vastly different from the scenic views we had been experiencing earlier in the day. Rick and I will leave you for this episode as we catch the last of a colourful sunset and watch the moon rise back at Gidget. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Give us a thumbs up if you have and leave a comment. Stay safe and enjoy life. Cheers for now. Rick and Rosemary. R&R Livin' Life.